Hello everybody, I am Zenith will Rule, and welcome to a brand new show. Now, you guys are probably familiar with the Disney Debate, which is one of the premier shows on this channel. It's one of the shows that I put a lot of time, effort, and passion into because, me and my good friends, we love Disney. We wanted to talk about it. It was one of the first shows that I started making when I made a channel, and it stuck around for a very long time. It's really become one of my favorite shows that I do, and it's really starting to take off, and I'm really happy with that. So the members of the Disney Debate decided to get together, and when we were watching some stuff for the Disney Debate, we said, well, there's this new thing coming out, and we wanted to talk about it. We saw the pilot of the brand new DuckTales, and DuckTales is like right up our alley since it is Disney. And what we decided was we're going to give an episode by episode breakdown of this new series as it airs. And we may do this with other series later on. We may go into the original series at some point. But for right now, what we're going to do is each episode as it airs, we're going to give our reaction, our take on the episode. And this is going to be kind of concurrently with our main series. This isn't going to replace anything. But this is tentatively called the DuckTales Debate. Now, this is a working title because Doug doesn't like it. But
we don't care what Doug says.
Yeah. If we come up with something better, we'll come up with something better, but this is what it is tentatively for right now. So anyway, without further ado and without any more aplomb, welcome everyone to the DuckTales Debate, where we talk about each individual episode of the brand new DuckTales series and somewhat compare it to the original. We did watch a little bit of the original pilot for this episode, so we're going to touch upon that. But first of all, before we dive into both of those shows, I would like to reintroduce my fellow cohorts, my partners in crime. This is Y2 Staller and Kat Macberrie. So how are you two doing today?
Woo! That song is in my head. It will never leave. It will never leave. I shit you not. I've been singing it for the last, couple days straight. I can't stop. I can't concentrate at work. Help me.
It will never leave. It will never leave. So, Mr. Old Man Eric, and yes, I'm going to continue with this reference that no one is going to get but us. How are you doing today, Mr. Old Man Eric?
I'm not that much older than you. And I'm not that much older than you, Kat, either. But no, I'm doing pretty good. From seeing the new DuckTales, and it kind of sucks that this is, while it is going to be concurrent, we only got the pilot, and they're not going to be showing the rest of the season not until next month. So,
Jerks.
So I know. So I'm watching this, and I'm really excited, and I'm excited for this. I'm like, all right, I want to see more of this because there's some intrigue and stuff, but we'll get to that in a bit. But I'm just disappointed, that they show the first episode, first two episodes, and then it's like, oh, we're gonna show you the rest of the season in the fall. It's like,
Yeah. So this episode is actually more like a teaser. This is our pilot for the show's pilot, and we won't be able to talk about any more for a little while. But I think this is actually kind of good, because it gives us a little bit of time to absorb what we actually have. It gives us a chance to really test the waters with this new show, I think. I'm planning to upload the DuckTales Debate on Mondays, so we're going to see how that performs alongside the regular Disney Debate, but we'll see. In any case, I think we should start off with our history with DuckTales. You guys probably know our history with Disney, but Kat, what is your personal history with the show DuckTales?
Well, I definitely grew up on it. One thing that the thing is, like, I did grow up with a lot of cartoons, but here's the thing: I also grew up without cable. For whatever reason, my parents, they just never went for it. In fact, my mom didn't get cable until it became mandatory to do so. That should tell you something. But I found ways around it, and thank God DuckTales happened to be on Channel 11 at the time, because like that was pretty much my childhood growing up, going home watching Disney Tunes. Like, it was great, and of course that freaking theme song. But yeah, I love DuckTales. I always watched the show. I recorded a couple episodes, and of course I even had the movie for a bit. I lost it in the great flood that happened in my basement, unfortunately, but I did own it, and I do remember a good portion of it. Granted, it's been a while, and I don't fully remember everything, but since we rewatched the pilot, I'm like, oh yeah, that was a thing. So yeah, when I heard about the reboot, I was like super excited, especially when I heard that the people from Gravity Falls were doing it. And I gotta say, the new one, just, it did not disappoint. So yes, I am very familiar with DuckTales, and I love the old one and I love the new one. So yeah, I'm excited to be talking about this.
And so, Mr. E-Rock, Rock Teardrop, what is your personal history with DuckTales?
Well, it's funny. It's for the most part pretty similar to Kat. Like, I didn't grow up having cable because my grandfather at the time, because he also owned the house that my parents used to live in, and for some reason didn't want cable in the house for some odd known reason. But I did watch. But I did remember watching DuckTales, and I remember along with the other stuff from the Disney Afternoon block, which included Chip and Dale Rescue Rangers and Tailspin and all that fun stuff. So wouldn't be surprised if all that comes back. But I do remember watching DuckTales. Like, as far as like trying to remember specific episodes, my mind's kind of at a blank. Like, I remember it. Like, I remember the show. But like all the little details and stuff, I don't remember. I mean, I actually had to rewatch some of the older stuff prior to us talking here, just so I can refresh my memory. And I'm like, oh yeah, now I remember all this. So, and it actually does hold up today. So, but it's going to be interesting to see us talking about the new DuckTales comparison to the old one.
My personal history is actually rather interesting because I didn't start with the show. And that's like what a lot of people started with. I actually, when I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to watch a lot of TV, but I was allowed to rent at least one movie a week, from the Hollywood Video that was down the store. And so I would go in and I would pick out one movie and I would check it out. And this is how I saw a lot of my childhood classics, like all the Batman and Superman movies and stuff like that. But I saw this movie on the shelf, and this was before I saw like Bartok the Magnificent. Like, this was one of the first animated films that I saw. It was DuckTales the movie, and watching this film, I'm like, this is really, really good. Like, this was a great film. This was a lot of fun. And it had gorgeous animation, and I fell in love with it. So when I finally got the ability to watch TV a few years later, I would put it on every now and again. Like, I don't recall every single episode, but I do recall the show. But the movie was the start of it all, and that movie I remember so fondly, especially because it had like some of the it had archetypical characters and stuff, like the reluctant genie and stuff like that, but it did stuff that was new with them, and it was very adult in its approach to a lot of things. The villain was incredibly scary, and I had a lot of fun with this movie. And now years later, it's so interesting to see DuckTales come back and see that it has this audience, because the moment it was announced, a lot of people were really talking about it and really happy about this. And I'm excited because this is being brought to a new generation. And if this goes well, I hope they bring in like Goof Troop, and I mean, Darkwing Duck is confirmed to be a part of this universe, and there's so many cool things that they can do with this, and I hope they bring back a lot of these old shows that were just canceled. So I hope that happens, and I hope they end up in Kingdom Hearts. So, yeah.
That'd be interesting. Then that'll just delay the game, what, another 5-10 years?
I didn't say 3. I said Kingdom Hearts. You can put them in the next game they make or whatever.
Like Kingdom Hearts 4.
Kingdom Hearts 3.527.
The Last Revenge.
the revengeing.
Inside the birth of the sleep or whatever.
365 half days.
3 quarters and a...
to the second power. Anyway, so let's talk our initial thoughts upon viewing this show. Now, I didn't have any prior knowledge of what this show is going to be going into it, aside from the previous version of the show, but I didn't see any of the trailers, and that's pretty typical of me. I don't like to be spoiled, in a sense. Like, I think you should be able to talk about it afterwards, but my version of spoilers is seeing too much information before watching the thing to color my perception of it, if that makes sense. So, going into it, I was completely blind, and we all sat together, and we all watched it. This was after we saw Snow White and the Huntsman, so it was actually a nice palate cleanser. But yeah, so we all sat down, and we all watched the new DuckTales, and I was very pleasantly surprised. Now, first thing that I do want to talk about, the episode for the first 2 episodes, the pilot altogether, is called Woohoo. So the official title of the episode is Woohoo. So when you watch it on TV, it says DuckTales, Woohoo. And that is so clever. I love that. The moment that was pointed out to me, I'm like, oh my God, that is amazing.
I loved it. Because it's like, like when I saw that, I'm like, oh yeah, these people know their audience. They know what they want. This is going to be incredible.
They know who they're making this for.
It's just such a nice reference. It's such a nice, it's a subtle joke because you might not even see the episode title, but if you're talking about it, it's like, I see what you did there. That was very clever. And in that same vein, let's talk about the theme song. Now, the theme song obviously is not in the first episode of the show because, how episodes usually run, but it's in the second episode, and honestly, I love it. I think this is a great redone version of the original song. The visuals are great. I think it does a great job representing this show. Kat, what are your thoughts on the theme song?
Oh, I love it. I like the new cover by the female singer. I like how it's animated like it's out of a comic book, because of course that's what it's based on. I love how it adds in, shots similar to how the first one did, random action shots, how it showcased all the villains and everything. In terms of the song, I gotta say the end of the theme song threw me off a bit, because I know the theme songs so well. And they slightly changed it at the end. They kind of mashed 2 of the lyrics together, and it's so quick you don't realize it till you're singing that part, and all of a sudden it's done, and I'm like, wait, what? I mean, it's not a big deal. It's just a slight difference that kind of throws me off every time I try to sing along with it.
All right, now Eric, what do you think on the theme song, Mr. Eric?
I thought the theme song was very well done. I liked it. It is a much more. It's a much modern take on it. I mean, much of the original, much of the instrumentally, it's modern, but it doesn't make it feel like it's all too. It doesn't ruin the overall tone of the song per se. So, I mean, they got it down pat, and the whole animation stuff in the beginning. That's just flawless. It just flows in and out, and it's just and it works very well. So I didn't really have a problem with it per se. I mean, yeah, the little lyric thing at the end, yeah, that it might be a little distracting for older viewers, but I don't know. I didn't really have too much of a problem with that either.
I actually didn't notice it But then again, like
Yeah, I don't think I noticed it either.
I was too busy looking at the animation, and I think what really sold me on it is that first opening shot when you have all the villains chasing the heroes, and that, you know, we had just seen two of the villains in the previous episode. Like it shows the pirate ghost, and it shows like some of these other characters, and it's just like, these are people that we're going to encounter. These are villains that we're going to see, and just it showcases just how big a scope, because you don't really realize that a lot of DuckTales villains are pretty well known, and you see them all together. You're like, oh yeah, I know that guy, I know that guy, and I know them, and they really do a good job of capturing the spirit of adventure and in this opening, and I think even more so than the original, this really gets you pumped to watch it, because the original animation was it was good for its time. I'm not going to say it wasn't, because I still listen to the old theme today, but it's showing its age a little bit now, and you can see that a lot of these locations were not going to actually be in the show. A lot of it was static shots. But it seems like they're really taking stuff that is going to be in the show to showcase in the opening.
Yeah, here's hoping. The very first place they go to on their adventure is Atlantis. So, yeah, pretty much anything's a possibility at this point. And I mean, they always found like lost civilizations like hidden underneath the Earth's crust, or in the South Pole, or at the center of the Earth, or even out in space. So yeah, and considering Scrooge is rich, it can, you know, get transport anywhere. Like, the possibilities are endless. Maybe they'll go back in time. Ooh-wee-oo. Nah, that reference would be too obvious.
So the opening theme is great. I think in general they set the stage well with this. Let's talk about the story of the pilot. Essentially, this is similar to the original pilot of the original DuckTales, where Donald is looking for a job in this version, and so in order to keep the boys out of trouble while he's, you know, trying to find work and failing miserably at it, I might add, because he keeps getting into trouble. So while he's out finding work, he leaves his three nephews in the charge of their Uncle Scrooge. And I think what works a little bit about this version is that from the very start, these three boys are very they seem to admire Uncle Scrooge a lot. Like, they talk about him like he's a big figure. In the original, they didn't really do it that much. Like, he just showed up to pick them up. But here, they revere him as an adventurer, and they really play up this angle that Scrooge is an old-time adventurer, and he made his fortune from all these adventures that he went on. And I think that's what really sells it, is that, you know, Donald needs someone to watch his kids, and they're always getting into trouble, and they're going to be left with their Uncle Scrooge, and they're like, oh, well, fine, Uncle Scrooge is great, like, he's done all this really cool stuff, and it really sets the stage for the stuff that is going to happen later. Would you agree, Kat?
Yeah, like, I mean, I rewatched the pilot because I, honest to God, didn't remember exactly what the situation was that caused the nephews to be under the care of Uncle Scrooge. I do like how I do like that Donald is not straight up abandoning them this time, because like in the pilot he decides to join the Navy, and he's like, okay, I'm gonna dump you on my rich uncle for a while. I hope you guys can adjust to that. I like in this one he's like actually legitimate concerned about, you know, caring for them and keeping their home afloat, literally, because it's a houseboat. And, you know, he reluctantly has to send them to their uncle, knowing what a greedy, horrible bastard he is. So I like that. I like that new dynamic. Like,
yeah, and it seems like he's going to be a major part of the show, because at the end of the pilot, the houseboat is kind of destroyed, and so he goes to live with Scrooge as well, which is like, oh, that's a new dynamic for the show.
I mean, Donald did show up once or twice in the original series, but it was more to comedic effect than they needed his help on something. Because again, it's Donald. Exactly how useful can he be before he messes stuff up? But no, I'm really interested, especially since Webby kind of built him up to be one of the greatest explorers ever. It's like Donald being a badass explorer. Let's see where they go with this. Like, I'm really intrigued to see that.
So we have this new dynamic where the boys go and see their Uncle Scrooge, and at first he doesn't really want to have anything to do with them. Not as much as the original, but like what he does is he really kind of confines them to one room, and he has the housekeeper really take care of them. Mostly because he's too busy mulling over the past and all this other stuff. But what really starts things off is they find, through the help of Webby, who is the granddaughter of the housekeeper, she shows up, she recruits them to go on adventures and stuff, and she brings them to this chamber of old artifacts, where all these things from his past adventures are, and they showcase there's a gong that if you ring it 3 times, an ancient evil will be summoned, and a pirate treasure chest where a ghost pirate lives, and a bunch of interesting stuff. And it turns out to be Uncle Scrooge's garage, which is amazing.
It's like he's so rich, and that's the least impressive things that he's collected over the years.
And he finds them messing with his stuff, and through a series of events where they fight off some of the creatures that they summoned from the garage, he realizes that his nephews are actually pretty much like him, because he's been really yearning for the good old days when he used to adventure, and he feels kind of washed up. And so he goes and he shows them that he still got it, and in this version, Scrooge is a lot more active, a lot more energetic. He very much seems like the adventurous type, and I like this change that he's not just a stingy old uncle. He's a guy who loves to go on adventures, and it really does play up to this character that they're trying to bring about, is this respectable old man who made his fortune from going to the deepest depths of the ocean in anywhere and everywhere. So I don't know, I like this dynamic where he sees the boys are pretty much just like he was back then, and he recruits them to go on adventures because they're just as good at getting into trouble as he is. Let's start with you, Eric. What do you think about this whole thing?
I actually like this dynamic a lot better than in the original series, how they set that up. Because in the original series, it was set up where Scrooge was... he kind of was an adventurer, but he was more like a businessman, but then he kind of did adventuring on the side. Here, it was like they decided, let's just make him a full-blown adventurer, because that's what everybody think of Scrooge from the original series. He's this big adventurer. So I kind of like how this new series just establishes that, just made him a full-blown adventurer, and that he's yearning for the old days, he's not what he used to be, and that his nephews are a reflection of his younger self. Not to saying that the old show didn't do that. In the old show, they did mention, Scrooge does say that, they kind of remind him of his younger self, and he's more of a... I think he kind of sees that more from, being fond of youth, that kind of thing, fond for his youthness. But in the new series, it's more, do I still have this? Do I still got it? Can I still go out and adventure? And can I, and my nephews are encouraging me to go out and do this again. So I kind of like that a little bit better as far as setup goes. So I really, really like that.
Yeah, I gotta say, when I rewatched the pilot, I never really realized how much of a stingy bastard Scrooge McDuck is. Oh my god. I always, for some reason in my head, it was always that, they like to go on adventures and they like to hunt treasure. That was their whole drive. But no, once I rewatched, I'm like, wait, So the entire reason they are going on these dangerous adventures, the entire reason they're risking their lives and destroying these civilizations and everything, is just so Scrooge could add more money to his money bank. It's him making himself richer, and everyone just goes along with it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, really? Really, you rich bastard? You need more gold? What, you don't have enough to swim in?
Well, he is named Scrooge. Speaking of the swimming and money thing, they do explain that in the new series, where apparently it's a skill of his that only he has developed, where he can specifically swim through his money. It's a talent that only he can do.
I'm assuming it's response to all the people that claim, that it is not physically possible to swim through that money because it's the equivalent of swimming through rocks, which it is. But yeah, I am glad that they do explain that, and I like that, he's so badass he bends the laws of physics just to have that particular skill. I think that's actually pretty cool.
In general, though, I think Scrooge is a better character here. Now, here's the thing. Scrooge is based off of Ebenezer Scrooge. Like, he's supposed to be a miserly old man in the original versions of, Disney animation. But I think it's great that the character has updated because a lot has changed over the years. And this character is much more endearing. I love his sense of adventure. I love when he puts on the diving helmet and he realizes that he needs help, or when he actually starts to fight off people, he grabs his cane and he gets into action, and I'm just like, oh my god, Scrooge is awesome. Like, he's a badass in this.
I know. I was so impressed. To be fair, the original Scrooge was active. But he wasn't that level of active. He wasn't fucking Jackie Chan active. And I do like that. I like that he's kind of in a way kind of a mix of Indiana Jones and Rick Sanchez. And the thing is the thing I really like is that they made him more likable. Cuz in the original one, I mean, the big joke was that Scrooge is a stingy old miser. To the point where in the pilot, he doesn't donate to the poor, saying that they don't deserve it. He steals an entire plate full of cheese samples just because he can. And he's so cheap, he won't even pay a taxi to pick up his nephews and makes them walk 3 miles down the road carrying their heavy luggage by themselves.
And feeds them those cheese samples for lunch and dinner for the next 3 days.
I know, right? So yeah, even in the get-go, he's an unlikable character, and true, they try to redeem him a bit by saying, oh, maybe I shouldn't be so mean. I mean, these boys are kind of like me. I should be nicer. But even then, his priority, first and foremost, is to get more treasure. So he's still not that sympathetic. And I'm glad they changed it in this, just made it so that, he does this for, the thrill of adventure. In a way, it kind of reminds me of Adventure Time, because in the episodes Finn and Jake, even though they do gather treasure and get weapons and mystical artifacts, as a result of their adventures, it just sits in a pile in their treehouse. They go on these quests for the sake of doing hero work, and I kind of like that. So, and I'm glad that they added this to DuckTales.
I also really like how they got him to come around, because watching the original pilot today, the reason why Uncle Scrooge kind of comes around is they're exactly like how I was. They do the partially hearing a sentence trope, which is so infuriating, where he's yelling to his butler about these kids, about how they're bad, and they do all these basically about how they get in trouble and they're always out for no good and this and that. And he's berating these kids, and then they walk away and they don't hear the rest of it, which is they remind me of myself when I was their age. You know what? I'm going to go lenient on them. And he actually doesn't afterwards, because there's another thing after. He doesn't even listen to his own monologue. It's just weird how they do this. And it's they did this kind of thing once in Gravity Falls, but it was actually much better done with that cliche. But I like that in the new series, there's an actual reason why he's reminded that these kids are just like him. It just they bring out the sense of adventure in him, and that makes so much more sense. I just always thought the original reason why he comes around is so stupid.
Yeah, I agree as well. It's very, very convoluted and forced, and it's like I get it. We need to, move the plot forward and get the ball rolling, but have show a little bit of connection between them. But then again, it's kind of hard. It's in my opinion, it would have been impossible for Scrooge to connect with the nephews in the original, considering that all three of them are exactly alike and don't have that much of a personality.
That's a nice segue, actually. Speaking of the nephews, they do a great job here, not only with Huey, Dewey, and Louie, but with Webby, of giving them all distinct personalities.
I could tell them apart for once. Oh my god.
And it's not just the animation, because the animation actually gives everything a distinct look. And it's different from what I remember, but I actually, on reflection, looking at it, it's easier to tell them apart, especially with their minor animations, especially Dewey, because he's very sassy. But they do a good job of giving everyone character. Webby is no longer this character who's just the token female of the group. She's actually Webby is like a would-be adventurer. She puts Uncle Scrooge on such a pedestal. She knows everything about every one of his adventures. She's detailed every single thing in the mansion. She's kind of like the tech support of the group, because she knows what's going on, and she's the one who brings them in. And she's quirky. She seems a little bit socially awkward because she is so smart, but she's quirky but not unlikable, and I like that they bring this out. She's almost like the Holtzman of this show, if they made her, if they gave her better writing.
She actually reminds me a lot of Mabel, and at first I thought that was a bit of a problem, because again they made her this cheerful, energetic, adventure-loving girl, and they even gave her a grappling hook in one of the trailers. And I'm thinking, oh god, are they just copying pasting this character? But by the second episode, they do show a bit of a difference between them. So I hope they go more with that, because don't get me wrong, I love Mabel from Gravity Falls, but I want Webby to be her own distinct character, especially given where she originated from. I should also mention I like this little Easter egg that they showed when they introduced her, because you see on her she has like this wall of basically of Scrooge McDuck and everything he's done and who he's connected to and everything. And you look on the far right corner, you see that doll that Webby from the original used to carry around, and it's nailed to the wall with the nail through its chest. I actually thought that was a little funny.
And speaking of little Easter eggs, or rather like a big Easter egg, they showcased for the very first time Donald Duck's parents.
Yes, we finally see Donald's parents a bit briefly, but at least now we know their names. We know how he's related to Scrooge.
It's interesting because it seems like he was removed from his family at some point. Maybe because he was so different from everyone else, or because he was so clumsy or something, but we learned that Donald used to go on adventures with Uncle Scrooge, and so this is a very interesting character history. This is the very first time in years that we understand how this family line works, and I love that. But yeah, let's go back to the nephews, because we didn't talk about them that much. Huey, Dewey, and Louie, they all have distinct personalities. You can tell them apart. And I think it helps that their voices aren't really... they really aren't as high-pitched, or... they didn't really do as much of an impression as the original pilot. Like, you can all understand what they're saying distinctly. They all have distinct voice actors, and they all give a performance that is really related to each person. Like, one's the smart one, one's the more calm, laid-back one, and Dewey seems to be like the chief troublemaker who gets into mischief the most.
Yeah, from what I heard, that they were kind of basing their personalities on their birth order, because I learned something interesting. Apparently, their names Huey, Dewey, and Louie. The reason why people say it in that order is because that's their birth order. So, with Huey being the oldest, Dewey being the middle child, and Louie being the youngest. So when they were making their personalities, they based them on the typical tropes of the sibling hierarchy. So you have Huey, the oldest, who is the more responsible one, who tries to follow the rules and have a clear objective goal, and he tries to do the right thing, although not always, because I mean it's the three nephews. They're going to be troublemakers no matter what. You have Dewey as the attention-starved middle child who always gets into trouble, is always loud and obnoxious and doing whatever he can to receive acknowledgement. And then you have Louis, who's the youngest, who is usually laid back and kind of mischievous as well as manipulative, because he's apparently a master liar as well as the evil triplet apparently. So I kind of like that. I like that they based on that hierarchy, because considering their nephews really had no personality to speak of, and they all had the exact same non-existent personality, this is a huge upgrade for them.
Agreed. What do you think of all four of these characters, Master Eric?
Well, going back to the nephews, I think going off of what Kat was saying, it does make it more. It does, for the audience, makes the characters a lot more relatable, because anybody who has someone like myself who has an older sibling and a younger sibling, and me being the middle child, mwahaha. It's something that I can relate, and I think to any of the kids that are watching it for a new generation, I think it's something that they can relate to. I also do like how it isn't like all the nephews have like a red t-shirt, a blue t-shirt, and a green t-shirt. Like they change it, like Dewey's blue is more like long sleeve, and I think like Hugh, and like one is like short sleeve, one is like long sleeve, and
Louis was wearing a hoodie.
Yes.
And Huey's the only one that wears a hat now. The others don't wear hats, and they style their would that be hair or feathers? Feathers different.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, and I'm totally fine. And I'm totally fine with that. They don't have to wear hats like all. They don't have to wear hats like all the time. I mean, at least you can tell just from the colors. Like you can tell which one is who. With Scrooge McDuck, I do like how he's definitely a lot more likable. He's just like how he's an old adventurer, and like he does it for the fun of it, but he's also rich. But he also gets rich while he's doing it, which makes him a little bit more. It makes him a bit more. I don't want to say eccentric, because that's not exactly what he is. But he's a lot more of a more tycoonish, I think I should say. Like, because in the original series, like we see him with like his business dealings and stuff. Here, it's more like he's in the adventuring business. Like he's in the business of just going out there and just finding rare stuff.
Agreed. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I actually like this one line he says, and I didn't realize he said it till I looked this up later. The line he says is, "I'm Scrooge McDuck. I made my fortune by being smarter than the smarties and tougher than the toughies, and I did it all square." And that is actually a quote both from the original comic that he premiered in, as well as from the animated series in the 90s. And I actually think the line makes a lot more sense in this version, because yes, Scrooge is definitely smart, as we saw in the animated film, because how else would he be able to seek out all this treasure? But in terms of toughness, the only reason he was tough is because, again, he was a greedy old bastard, and nothing could come between him and his gold. But in this case, he is like literally tough. He like, you can't knock him down. And even if you do, he'll get right back up, and he will kick the shit out of you. So I really like that they kept that line in, because it sums up his character perfectly.
Now, Eric, what did you think of Webby?
I like this one a little bit better, because instead of her just being the fulfilling the Smurfette principle, I like how she's a lot more dynamic. She's a lot more engaging. She's like kind of like this Scrooge McDuck fangirl, like, with the little board, like connecting all the dots with how everyone is related and stuff like that, and keeping track of all of Scrooge's adventures. I really like that, and that plays in her and she always tries to do. She always wants to do like the right thing, but always afraid. Like in the second half of the episode, or the second part or two-part, whatever. There's a scene where like they're off in Atlantis, but doesn't want to get in trouble. So Louis tells her to lie as a way to, to say like, oh, you're at a friend's place, and there's a babysitter, there's somebody talking Swedish, and and I love how they play, and with her it's like, oh, it's like she doesn't want to, like she always wants to be good, like do the right thing, but she was kind of like forced to lie and stuff like that, and Louis like, okay, all right, I don't know how you're gonna get out of that one, but just little stuff like that, it makes her a much more interesting character overall.
All right, so the first episode is primarily used to establish this group of characters. Like, they give us the nanny, but she's not really a big presence aside from saying that she's not Uncle Scrooge's secretary over and over again. Even though he keeps telling her to write stuff down and cancel all plans and blah, blah, blah. And one thing I did notice was the butler from the original series doesn't appear to be around.
No, he doesn't.
I'm kind of glad, because the butler was kind of a stereotype and not really a compelling character. He was just there to, look all stuffy and look at everyone with disdain and just, have no emotion whatsoever. So I believe that they combined his character with Mrs. Beakley, and I frankly feel that the character is probably going to benefit a lot more from it, because don't get me wrong, Mrs. Beakley was awesome in the original, but I think this version gives her a bit more dignity and makes her a little more clever than her original counterpart was. Mm-hmm. I actually like how she keeps saying she's not a secretary. It actually reminds me of Mrs. Hudson from Sherlock.
I am not a plot device.
I really love what they do with her character, and I love that she has such a, she's pretty much sticking up for herself the whole time. I love that she knew the entire time that Webby was lying to her, and that she would just kind of went along with it because she knew that she was in good hands with Uncle Scrooge. And, this core cast of characters is a really good core cast of characters. That's what the first episode is all about. It's all about establishing this core cast of characters, and it's a very strong opening showing us everyone while still not being boring, but they don't really go on a mystery, they just find the garage. The second half of the pilot is them going to Atlantis, and this is interesting because it brings in Glomgold, which is one of the arch rivals of Uncle Scrooge. And the funny thing about this is that he hires Donald to help him find the lost treasure of Atlantis, along with two other assassins. One of them is it's like Stabby McStabberston and then like Bash and Crash Baggins or something like that. Like they're really obviously like bad guy names, and I love that. But he hires Donald Duck.
I did think that was a nice twist and a good way to bring in Glomgold. And I will say, in terms of his counterpart from the original, Glomgold really isn't any different. Like, the only difference is that he's more concerned with being more Scottish than Scrooge McDuck, which I think is funny.
And I'm more Scottish.
Yeah. Although I will say, though, this is part of the reason why I like this version of Scrooge better, because looking at the pilot from the original, because Glomgold appears in the pilot as well, when you really think about it, there is no difference between Scrooge and Glomgold. They're both cranky old misers. They're both obsessed with wealth. They're both extremely greedy. They're both really Scottish, and they're overall just greedy, gold-seeking bastards. There is no difference between them other than the fact that Scrooge has a loving family to support him. Because I always wonder that Because, I mean, we're supposed to root for Scrooge and against Glomgold, but, like, if you switched hats and one wore a kilt, like, could you really tell the difference? Really? So I'm glad that they kept him as is and improved Scrooge, because I think it enhances their good guy bad guy dynamic a lot more. And it kind of like makes fun of how Scrooge used to be through Glomgold, and just how obsessed he is with being more wealthy and more stereotypically Scottish. So I kind of really like that.
Yeah, he's going on about like how no, I will be the number one wealthiest person in the world, and he goes on about that, and he's a lot of fun in this entire episode. Like, he just does a great job of just hamming it up, and I think the payoff is great when, like, Donald spends the entire time in the waiting room while he's waiting for the interview, just doing the wrong thing. Like, he staples like stuff to like the chair, and like he ends up like hanging from the ceiling. Like Donald Duck would, but he ends up getting the job, and you're like, oh, how could anyone hire him? And then Glomgold walks in. It's like, hello. I'm like, oh, that is brilliant. So the episode really is about both of these parties. You have the main party and Glomgold's party, both trying to find the city of Atlantis. And the person that gets them there is Launchpad. Now, we should talk about Launchpad.
Launchpad is great.
Oh, Launchpad. He's a pilot, you know.
And Launchpad has some of the funniest lines in the show, and like we didn't talk about him a little bit earlier. I wanted to save him for later because he isn't too major a character. He's more of a background one, but he's Mr. D's driver. No, Mr. D. Why? But he's Uncle Scrooge's driver, and he's the pilot and everything. But like he's eager. He's a very go-getter person, but he keeps crashing. Like, he's crashed the plane twice, and the second episode opens with the funniest opening thing I've ever seen. It showcases a small like dent in somebody's headlight, and he's writing a note like, "Dear Sir or Madam," and he goes on like, Scrooge will happily, and then he crosses off happily, pay for all damages. And then it's like he goes in this whole note. Now, that alone would be funny. But then he turns around and you see that like 5 other cars have been flattened. Like, completely flattened. And he goes to write notes on the rest of the cars. Like,
Dear Sir or Madam.
that payoff, like, that is how you do a good setup and payoff. You have the initial funny moment, but then you see the bigger picture where everything is in flames, and I'm like, yes, that is how you do comic gold. And that is Launchpad's character in a nutshell, is that he is the comic relief, and he does it so well. Like, there's a part during the episode where he just gets attacked by a bunch of snakes, and they're poisonous snakes, and he gets woozy from all the venom, and he starts talking in like a strange accent. And so when Webby is on the phone, she says, "Oh, I'm just with my Swedish uncle," and he goes on the phone and he talks like pretty much perfect Swedish because he's delirious from the venom. And I'm like, all the jokes at his expense are great.
I gotta say, like, I'm probably gonna get some flack for this, but I actually think he's a vast improvement on the original Launchpad. And I say that because I know Launchpad was a big favorite during the show, because again, he was kind of the comic relief, but he was also kind of, you know, the hero type. So, you know, given how he was designed and everything, to the point where he actually, you know, transcended shows. So he had that power. But I think he's a vast improvement because, again, when I was watching the pilot episode, I realized that Launchpad is kind of a dick. Like, one of his famous sayings is, "There's not a thing with wings that I can't crash." So, like, he's known for, you know, being a reckless flyer to the point where he pretty much crashes any aircraft that he pilots. But the thing I didn't realize before watching it was that he does this deliberately. He purposely causes all of this damage. He destroys what I assume is government property, and he willingly endangers lives because, again, something's going to be on the ground when he lands, and he has absolutely no remorse about it. In fact, he's proud of it. And that kind of came off as dickish to me, because it was even baffling that he willingly admits this to whoever will listen to him. Scrooge knows this, the nephews know this, everyone else in the show knows this, and they still fly with him. What person in their right mind would fly with a pilot that purposely crashes into shit?
Here what works is that he's just a bumbling idiot, and they make it very clear that, you know, he's a well-meaning person, but like when he's driving in the initial episode, he keeps like going off and like going to the other side of the road, and it's because he's paying attention to other things. And then later, the Scrooge acts in surprise when he finds out that he's a pilot. And so it makes sense later why he would crash the plane, because he's probably self-taught and no one else knew that he was a pilot. And so they're like, oh, well, if you're a pilot, let's try it out. Like, they do a good job of setting him up as a person who's well-meaning but still bumbling, and I like that.
Yeah, I agree with what you said. I am really glad that they went that route, and it actually makes sense, you know, that he would be a self-taught pilot, given how notoriously bad he is. But the thing that really makes me like him is that he takes responsibility for the shit that he destroys. Because Launchpad in the original, he would crash into buildings, he would crash into other planes and cars and whatever, cause all this damage, but he wouldn't take responsibility for it. He would just fly away to the next adventure, you know, disregarding whoever suffered at his hand. But in this, you see he actually tries to make amends for all the damage he causes. Like what you said with the scene where he was writing those notes to all the cars that he destroyed. So, yes, I definitely like him a lot more in this version. Although I do feel bad for Scrooge that he ultimately has to pay for all of it.
He did say in the initial episode that, you know, any dent comes out of his pay. So you gotta wonder, like, you know, how much Launchpad gets paid, because it's probably coming out of his pay.
He probably gets like $5 a week.
Eric, what do you think of Launchpad McQuack?
I do like they play a lot more to the humor in this time around with him crashing stuff. And I remember like in the pilot episode, haha. In the first episode, you see him, but like they don't trust him. Like Scrooge doesn't trust him as a pilot. Like they clearly established that it's like no. I don't need you as a pilot. You're bad enough as a driver. I don't need you flying anything. And then in the very end, it's like, oh, I'm a pilot, and so they use him for flying to go after the Golden Dragon. So he still pilots, you know, decently, but he still crashes. I like the fact that he crashes more. He uses they use him crashing in more sense of him being a bumbling idiot as opposed to him just deliberately crashing. I like that aspect a lot better.
So we have all the characters on board. You have Glomgold's crew going to try to find the lost jewel of Atlantis, and then you have Scrooge's crew coming in trying to get it as well. And they set up a very interesting treasure hunt. It's very much Indiana Jones, where both parties are trying to get to it, and then one betrays the other. And when Glomgold thinks he has the jewel of Atlantis, he then betrays Donald. The funny thing with him and Donald is that throughout the entire thing, he keeps praising Donald like he's the one who's doing everything completely right. Like he's like, oh, I should give you a raise. You're doing a great job, Sonny Jim. And and it's all just a trap, because he knows that Donald is related to Uncle Scrooge, and so he's using him as leverage. And I think that's brilliant. That's a great plan. And he gets away with the jewel. Well, what he thinks is the real jewel. Instead, the real jewel is something that powers Atlantis, kind of like in the Disney film. And they find it out using help from Donald, Uncle Scrooge, and the nephews. They all work together to solve this, and they get out and they get the real jewel. And it's a very great episode. It's quick-witted. It's funny. They have a lot of great sight gags. Like, there's one part where they're traveling in a submarine, and they are on their way to the treasure, and Scrooge does his best to plot out a course, avoiding all the obstacles like a giant squid. Well, Dewey wants to help out, and he wants to be recognized as an adventurer, so he changes the course of the map, something they told us not to do in a Goofy movie, but he did it anyway. So he changes the map, and you see a very quick, like, 3-second montage of them getting attacked by giant squid, by, like, underwater Aquaman and stuff like that. And then later, you see a little cutaway to where one of these underwater sea creatures is sticking out of the toilet trying to attack. And it's such a great gag, and I love what they're able to do with just a quick few seconds. They don't dwell too much on any of these gags. One of the major problems of the original, and I think you guys can probably agree, is that there's a way over-reliance on cliches and puns. Now, I'm a fan of a good pun, but really, they do it every single line, and it kind of gets old. Like, the humor here is so much better. Would you agree, Kat?
Oh, most definitely. Like, watching the pilot and the amount of puns they use, I'm like, yeah, come on, let's move on with it. But then the humor in the new one is just it's so great. As I said, it reminds me of Gravity Falls with how quick it is and the timing is perfect and everything. So I definitely say it's a vast improvement.
Would you agree with that, Eric?
I would agree with that as well. There's a lot more variety of jokes that they're using in this new series, because in the old series, much of the humor was pun related. But here, not so much on puns, but also a lot of visual humor. That was the one thing that I noticed after looking back at the original series, was there was a lot more visual gags in this one than there was in the original series. Because I think in the original series, they focused a lot more. They had a lot more action-oriented stuff when it comes to sight stuff, but here they use it more not just for action but also for comedy, and I like that because you get a little bit of both.
Can I just say my favorite visual like gag scene? Like, it's not really a gag, but I just thought it was really funny. Was after Donald drives the nephews to Scrooge's place, and he gets out to greet Scrooge, and they both have like this icy reception toward each other, and Donald addresses him by the title Uncle Scrooge, and the nephews realize they're related. They start freaking out, and then Dewey literally gets out of the car, rolls across the roof, and then back into the car. I thought that was hilarious. I want a gif of that. It's so funny.
I also love the interaction between them. He says, like, now no funny business, no tricks, and they say, yes, Uncle Donald, and he's like, I wasn't talking to you guys.
I love that line. Honestly, I love their whole dynamic. It is so different than how it used to be. Because it was always that Donald was friendly toward Uncle Scrooge, who was always acted disdainfully toward him because, because he was poor, he thought he was a bumbling idiot, and he thought he was a slacker and everything. But Donald kind of took it with good humor because, he's family. But in this version, Donald actively does not like Scrooge, and they actively do not like each other. And every time they're on screen together, they're always like whipping insults at each other. I really like that, and it gives Donald a lot more personality aside, like, this time, well-deserved anger instead of just random anger.
And it leads to one of the more Alex Hirschian things about this show. Now, I'm not sure if Alex Hirsch is involved in this, but one of the creators of Gravity Falls is involved, and there's a lot of mysteries subtly hinted at throughout the course of these two episodes. Very, very well foreshadowed and hinted at, and I think it's setting up for something later, much like Gravity Falls. Now, first is the relationship between Donald and Uncle Scrooge. They mention that he was a sidekick, and they showcase a painting of him working alongside Uncle Scrooge, and he was like, he's kind of like the Robin to Scrooge's Batman, and I think that's an interesting dynamic. So we don't know how they had this falling out. We know that it was 10 years since they last saw each other, which is always an interesting number. And at the end of the second episode, the big mystery dropped, is that we see for the first time the parent, the mother of Huey, Dewey, and Louie, and she's also in that same painting. And it makes you wonder, like, why is Uncle Donald taking care of them? Did something happen to her? What happened? What about the father? Like, what is going on with this? It's such a great ending, such a great mystery.
No, they finally acknowledge their parents for the first time ever. Well, not technically the first time ever. But, I mean, I believe in the early comics, they allude to the fact that the nephews are the sons of Donald's sister. So there's at least that connection existent right there. But they never actively, tackled the subject of their parents. They are never seen. They're never talked about. They may as well be non-existent, given how often the subject is brought up. But I really like it how not only do they address them in this show, but they address that the sister was actually a part of Scrooge's old entourage and was an adventurer herself. I think that is brilliant, and I am really stoked to see where they go with this.
It really does a few different things. First of all, let me just say I'm glad that there's several female characters in this show that are not token female characters, that have agency, that have personality, that are strong, not a physical sense, but strong as in they're great characters, they're strong-willed, they have personalities, and they can go off on adventures as well. And some of the primary adventurers, like Webby, and it seems like their mom, were adventurers, and I'm just like, this is a great thing for kids to look up to. Young women need a representation in media, a figure to look up to and admire, and I think this is great that Disney is doing this in the show. But moreover, I'm just intrigued by the startup of this mystery, setting up in only the first 2 episodes, and it's just like, what's going to happen next? Like, there's going to be a lot of mystery, and we're probably not going to find out for a very long time. But I'm wondering if they're going to drop even more hints. What other mysteries are we going to uncover? This is legitimately amazing.
Yeah, I don't know if I could be more impressed with the show than I already am. Because, I mean, granted, it's not completely perfect. There are a few minor things, but honestly, everything else about it just, as a whole is just brilliant. I have not seen I've not seen a reboot like this in a long time. I mean, I've seen really good attempts, but this one I think blows them out of the water. Like, I didn't think I could love DuckTales any more than I did, and then this show comes along. I mean, dear God, like, people watch this show. Like, it's on YouTube, it's on demand, and eventually when Disney figures out their streaming situation, it will be streamed. So, yes, please watch this show. It is just so damn good.
Yeah. Before we get into final thoughts, I just want to say, this is how you do a reboot. Teen Titans Go and Powerpuff Girls really need to take advice from this because, it really embraces fans of the original without going too overboard with fan service. It does a great job of setting up these characters, but even if you've never seen the original show, it is a great show for anyone. It acknowledges the past while still being a reboot and still moving on to the future and hinting at things to come. So yes, this is how you do it. Anyway, I'm going to move over to final thoughts. Eric, what are your final thoughts on the first 2 episodes dubbed Woohoo of DuckTales?
This is actually surprisingly good. Like, I the only thing I knew about it was that they were bringing it back, and I knew some of the voice actors that they brought on, they're actually pretty good. So watching this, I'm like, wow, this is way better than I remembered. So I'm actually looking forward to this. I definitely do want to see, like, the mystery of, like, what happened, with Donald and Huey, Dewey, and Louie's parents, like, that whole mystery stuff. I mean, I'm pretty sure, obviously, they're going to drop hints as the series progresses, but I'm really interested, but I'm interested in that. Plus, also, I like the humor. There's a lot of variety of jokes in here. There's definitely a lot of action, a lot of mystery. So, and it knows when to have fun with itself. So, I'm really looking forward to this. This is going to be fun.
Well, I pretty much made myself clear earlier, but I'll say it again. This show is awesome. I really could not recommend it more. Like, just the way they improved on everything, because I mean, like I said, I hadn't seen the original show in a long time. My nostalgia goggles made me think it was flawless, but this one just blew it out of the water, and it is just so refreshing, and I'm just so excited to see more episodes. I just wish I didn't have to wait a month to watch these episodes, but I couldn't be more excited. And if you guys can find it, definitely watch it. I cannot recommend it any more than I already have, except for this time. Go watch this show! Do it! Do it! Eat the broccoli.
Sissy boy. All right. Well, my final thoughts on this show is that it was a very pleasant surprise. As someone who didn't really grow up too much with the original, but has fond memories of the film, this updates everything in such a good way, and I think anyone can sit down and enjoy it. There was a huge stream, like a 24/7 broadcast of the show when we were watching it. But, you know, you can go online, watch it there. Like, this is definitely deserving of praise. Go, do it, go out and watch it. Highly recommend it. And we're going to continue doing our episode by episode look at this show and see if it gets any better or worse or where it goes from here. Again, if this goes over well, we may do like other Disney shows. We may do the original DuckTales. It all depends on what you guys think. But for right now, we are doing the rebooted DuckTales. So woohoo to that.
Woohoo!
Anyway, guys, this has been the pilot episode of the DuckTales debate. Thank you guys for tuning in to this extra special new project that we're working on. We hope you like it. We love DuckTales, and we're really looking forward to more. In any case, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, if you guys would like to help support the show, you can always go on the Patreon page at patreon.com/Zenith will review, and you can help out the show by, maybe donating $1, and that dollar gives you lots of perks. In any case, none of these videos will ever be hid by a paywall, so they will always be available for view for anyone, but if you want to help out the show, it's there. With all that being said, I am Zenith will rule.
I'm Kat Macberrie.
I'm Y2 Staller.
And we are here to say that life is like a hurricane.
Here in Duckburg.
Race cars, lasers, airplanes.
It's a duck blur.
Might solve a mystery.
Or rewrite history.
DuckTales, woo!
Woo!
Tales of daring, do bad, and good luck tales, woo!
All right, later, guys.
Later.
TTFN, ta-ta for now.
Hey, this is Megami33. Thank you for watching Zenith Will Review. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more awesome videos. If you like what you see, check out the Patreon page at patreon.com/Zenith Will Review.
Some say that life is like a hurricane.
Christopher Walken, what did you get here?